The question of who is more powerful, the user or the platform. And of course, you ask any humanities academic that, you're going to get a predictable answer, which is it's complicated. Collectively, user communities and their practices have been responsible for the development of much of the wonder of digital media. Platforms don't want to lose the users, they need them. And so they are, in a certain kind of way, responsive to the needs and practices and wants of users. But when it comes to collective bargaining, organisation, then it becomes more difficult. And just looking at the relationship between platforms and users may not be enough, and we may need state intervention and other kinds of policy intervention regulation to help out. My name is Jean Burgess. I'm a professor of digital media in the Digital Media Research Centre at QUT in Australia. My chapter, well, I was very fortunate to get the first word in, I guess. My task was to provide a bit of an overview of how we might approach the platforms that support creators. I discussed a little bit about platformization, a bit about platform studies as a field, and a bit about some of the methods that we can use to kind of get at the relationship between creator practices, agency, and the power relations between creators and platforms. It's impossible to discuss any particular creator community or indeed the sort of development of social media entertainment without talking about the role of particular platforms, which can't be generalized, but rather you need to understand the YouTube-ness of YouTube or the Twitter-ness of Twitter or the TikTok-ness of TikTok or whatever it might be as well. Platformization is a concept that could be taken to indicate the growing role and power of a small number of proprietary digital platforms owned by an even smaller number of primarily US-based, but not only US-based companies. We can think about the way that websites gradually and inexorably over the 2000s became platformized in terms of their architectures and their content all becoming part of logics of data markets and advertising driven web, where all kinds of different functions that were once kind of interconnected among websites and an open web are concentrated within the business logics and architectures of those platforms. So the chapter really focuses on how to study platforms. I'm keen to explore the way that digital methods as a specific framework for approaching the study of digital platforms can both involve kind of computational big data methods, but also more qualitative and critical approaches, and the way that these can be combined and how some of these hybrid digital methods can be actually most productive for studying the kind of rich relationships between content and practices and larger scale patterns of use on platforms, as well as the increasingly important area of the way that automated content curation and content moderation in that context of commercial platformization, how all of that might work together. An objective study like YouTube, for example, could be of interest to a huge range of disciplines, from computer science to information systems to historians even, and sociologists, political communications people. Having a sense of what your core disciplinary home base is in terms of how you approach questions, what methods you can use, but then being part of a conversation with some of those other folks can be really liberating. The standard narrative is that the World Wide Web, which was built on the internet, was remarkably open technically, but right from the beginning, of course, startups were trying to figure out how to organize it. And so that's where you get search engines from. And then search engines become major companies that build out further applications on top of the web. But early on, I'd say the web was more open, but it was also not accessed by as many people. Not as much investment was put into making it really, really usable. And so that's one thing that platforms did as well. And we have to recognize that. In terms of the future, there's never been so much policy and regulatory attention placed on these platforms in the EU, which has the most investment in regulation, even in the US, which traditionally has taken a primarily libertarian approach, and in Australia, where there are real concerns about the viability of domestic media industries.
Who runs the world, global tech giants or governments?
It feels like a turning point anyway, where there's kind of been runaway development, concentration of ownership and power, and now there's certainly everything is up for grabs in terms of regulation, in terms of public sentiment towards regulation as well. My current research moves on a little bit to studying the role of automated decision-making technologies. And so our methods continue to develop as well alongside that, integrating more sort of machine learning into our own methods and developing new hybrid digital methods for understanding the algorithmic operations of platforms.